It's much more than a case of alleged fratricide. The presumed poisoning at Kuala Lumpur airport of the half-brother of North Korean strongman Kim Jong-Un has triggered a recall of ambassadors and put Pyongyang watchers on high alert. Why him? Why now? Hot on the heels of a fresh ballistic missile test, one of the world's most reclusive regimes has yet again succeeded in grabbing our full attention. Was that the intention here? We'll be asking our panel whether, if it is indeed a political assassination, it's a sign of strength or weakness. For his first day on the job, Donald Trump's new national security advisor can ponder what a volatile planet it is as he addresses the role of the 28,000-plus U.S. military personnel stationed south of the 38th parallel. How should Washington, but also Beijing and the rest of the region, react? Today in the France 24 debate, the workings of a rogue nation. With us, Dorian Malovic, Asia editor for French newspaper La Croix, the author of North Korea in 100 Questions. And the untimely death of political dissidents is one of the chapters. We can perhaps discuss that in a little bit. Thank you for being with us. Also with us, Benoit Kennedy, Vice President of the France-Korea Friendship Association. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And from Washington, Kari Kazanis, Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest and Executive Editor for the National Interest. Thanks for being with us here.
Thanks for having me.
The France 24 debate, where you've been reacting on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. The latest, no sign of a heart attack, no sign of puncture wounds. Coroners in Kuala Lumpur, though, still refusing to say what did kill Kim Jong-Nam. More now from Delano de Souza.
A diplomatic spat is brewing between Malaysia and North Korea. This after North Korea's ambassador cast doubt over Malaysia's handling of the investigation into the death of Kim Jong-Nam. Comments that resulted in Kuala Lumpur recalling its envoy to Pyongyang.
The crime has been committed in Malaysia, and therefore it is incumbent upon us to find out the truth about the crime, and they should help us to find out the truth. That is more important than making sweeping and baseless statements, because Malaysia is not a pawn of any country.
Malaysian authorities have yet to establish what killed Kim Jong-Nam. So far, a post-mortem conducted last week has ruled out a heart attack. Investigators are also still waiting to conduct DNA tests, a task made difficult with no next of kin stepping forward.
So far, we are still waiting for the next of kin to report to us. These analyses are meant to confirm the identity of the deceased person and also the cause of death, both which are still pending at the moment.
South Korean and U.S. officials believe the half-brother of Kim Jong-Un was poisoned at Kuala Lumpur International Airport before he asked authorities for medical assistance. North Korea, meanwhile, has demanded the body of Kim Jong-Nam be returned immediately while denying the identity of the victim himself.
Dorian Malovic, what did you glean, first of all, from looking at that CCTV footage?
I watched the CCTV footage yesterday morning when it was released. Okay, my first reaction was, why was it Fuji TV? Fuji TV is a Japanese, very far-right, extremist, conservative channel. How did they get the footage? How much did they pay for it? So who are the middlemen between that? And the Malaysian, this is a leak, or they pay for it. But apart from that, first of all, the Kim Jong-Nam was supposed to be on Kim Jong-un blacklist and as the next target from Kim Jong-un. He was alone in the hall. No bodyguards, whether Chinese, Korean, or Malaysian. So he was alone. He was at the, it's not international airport, it was the low-cost international airport in Kuala Lumpur. So it's far away from the city. It was very easy, you know, to be around and less security. And then suddenly you have those two women arriving. And you can see a kind of a white kind of stuff, you know, and you don't know.
Looks like a handkerchief.
Handkerchief, and you don't know whether it's whipped or sprayed. So that's the other question. And now after that, we saw him going to the clinic, and then he died on the way to the hospital. The idea is, is he really Kim Jong-Nam? So far, we have to check because no DNA, we cannot compare. They have everything, but they need the next of kin, you know, like the son or someone from the family. They don't have that so far. So we don't know nothing, actually.
Harry Kazianis, do you have any of the answers to the questions Dorian's just put forth?
Sorry.
They're very good questions, but unfortunately, I do not have a lot of answers.
Okay.
But my initial reaction is it most likely is Kim Jong-Nam, but as your guest accurately says, we don't know until we have the DNA. So that is completely fair and accurate to say. But to be quite honest with you, this action, I'm not shocked by what Kim Jong-Un has done here. It's very clear that Kim Jong-Un and the North Korean regime will do anything and everything to survive. That is really their ultimate goal. This is really, when we're talking about North Korea, a lot of it is very basic, but also very brutal human psychology. The North Korean state and Kim Jong-un act more like Michael Corleone than they do, a nation state. Basically, they will do whatever it takes to survive, and specifically, Kim Jong-un will do whatever it takes to lead his country.
Right, but just before we talk about the motive, and we're going to get to that, just specifically on this point of what he was doing alone in the low-cost terminal.
It doesn't make any sense, to be honest with you. And I think that actually raises another question. How did North Korean agents or supposed North Korean agents know he was there? Did somebody leak this information to them? Did a confidant or a bodyguard get tipped off? So we continue to have more questions than we do answers, but that's typical for North Korea. I think everybody would certainly understand.
Benoit Kérédé, first of all, you heard the coroner there saying, why doesn't the next of kin come forth with DNA? That way we can clear up a positive ID.
Yes, so far it's very difficult to know
why don't they come forward.
Kim Jong-nam, indeed. What we know is that the man who was assassinated, because it was an assassination, even if we don't know so far the exact cause of the death, the name of the passport named Kim Chol. Kim Chol is not Kim Jong-nam, but we can imagine that when somebody important travels abroad, he can have alias, so it proves nothing. No, what is interesting, the first information about it came from the National Intelligence Service from South Korea. Every time there is some strange news about North Korea, it comes from the South Korean Intelligence Service. So what is interesting for me, it is not to jump to the conclusion. The Malaysian police is doing his job, so we have to know about it.
Well, do you believe it's Kim Jong-nam?
It's probably Kim Jong-nam, but we need the proof. But what suddenly it was so quickly known? Everybody points out at North Korea, but Kim Jong-nam is not nobody. First, he has many ties with Macau, with mafia, with Chinese triads. So it is also a possibility. And another something interesting, and many South Koreans insist on that point. The National Intelligence Service always insists on North Korea as a work state close to elections. There will be presidential election in South Korea. And it is very surprising. Suddenly, a man disappeared.
So what are you suggesting? That South Korea could somehow be responsible?
Maybe, I would say that it helps them. It helps them at a moment when the conservative power is very weak in South Korea.
Dorian Malovic?
It's not on that, but also going back to why was it in Malaysia? We have to explain the special relationship. And even
it's one of the rare countries where you don't need a visa if you're from North Korea.
To be honest with you, even having been reading this book, I didn't know it was so easy for Malaysian and North Korean to go and to travel visa-free.
Yes.
Which is crazy. I mean, when you know how difficult it is. So that means you have a few hundreds North Koreans in Malaysia. And so for Kim Jong-nam to be there, maybe he felt more secure and relaxed than in any other country. That's why, that could explain why he was alone and then...
Why he let his guard down.
Yes.
One reaction on the hashtag F24 debate, really strange that North Korea would protest against an autopsy being conducted on Kim Jong-nam. Why are they protesting about the autopsy?
Yes, because Malaysia, as Dorian Malovic said, is a very close country to North Korea. Malaysia tries to get a balance between South and North Korea. So for the
why don't they just let the autopsy go forth? Why don't they help in the investigation?
Because for the North Koreans, they consider that it is not fair, that they are not associated. But we can understand the Malaysian government. The Malaysian government must be very embarrassed. First, killing somebody in an airport. And it is not the first time that there are strange things. Just remember, not only people disappeared in a strange way, also planes disappear in a strange way in Malaysia. So for the Malaysian government, I would say it is something very shocking. So they try to keep the balance. They try to be very...
But that doesn't answer my question. My question is,
yes.
Why would North Korea protest against an autopsy being conducted?
Or because so far they fear a sort of manipulation. It is a line of defense. They say it is an alliance between the Malaysian government and hostile forces, that is to say South Korea.
Harry Kazianis, that brings us back to the question you started broaching, which is the motive for all this. Why now?
I think the answer is fairly simple. Kim Jong-un doesn't want any rivals. I mean, we just have to look back in recent history at some of the things that North Korea has done, and I think the answer is pretty clear. I mean, he's killed pretty much anybody that could stand in his way. He's killed generals. He killed his I believe it was his uncle, his uncle. So this is a pattern that Kim Jong-un...
But was Kim Jong-Nam a rival? He was somebody who liked to gamble, who didn't seem like he was much of a player.
That's true. Years ago, he was more of a rival. There's been reporting in the last couple of days that suggested that in the event of some North Korean collapse, or if China ever felt the need to impose its own sort of regime change, that Kim Jong-nam would be a possible, and I state this very liberally, a possible replacement. Now, that doesn't seem very likely, but in the game of international politics, it seems like anything's possible. So I think that is really the biggest motivation for doing something like this. We have to keep in mind, Kim Jong-un has very few allies except China. He faces a robust U.S. military. He faces a strong South Korea, a strong Japan. If you put yourself in Kim Jong-un's shoes, which is something obviously very hard to do, you come to the realization that you're going to do anything you can to secure power.
But on that very point, picking up on what Dorian said, why burn your bridges with Malaysia, one of the few countries where North Koreans can travel without a visa?
Well, I mean, I think there is value there, but burning bridges with Malaysia isn't going to be an existential threat to North Korea. Certainly troubling, but I think there's more value for Kim Jong-un to take out his brother than to keep relations in Malaysia, to be frank.
Dorian Malovic, your idea, what's the motive, if it is indeed an assassination?
I would tend to disagree a little bit on this image of Kim Jong-nam as a rival, a political rival, to take the power if there is a vacuum or, a coup d'etat, in Pyongyang. I mean, from what we know about Kim Jong-nam, he was in Macau. Okay, he loved the women, casino and everything, but he was not so rich now. And then he's 45. I mean, he disliked politics. Even though in 2011 he said, I don't like the system of the dynasty, the Kim dynasty. I mean, that doesn't put him in a place of being a dissident and then taking the power. He was not interested in politics. And I don't...
But that's how Kim Jong-un was described before he ascended power. Both of them going to those Swiss schools and...
Yeah, but Kim Jong-nam stayed longer, much longer in Switzerland than Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-nam can speak English, German, and French, which is Kim Jong-un maybe not as fluently from what I know, even German or even French. But that's why there is another possibility that it can be, okay, business-related things. He was on a blacklist, okay, we know that. But it was just a revenge because he criticized the regime. But then you have another possibility that a general or someone in the hierarchy in Pyongyang wanted to make a good action towards the
impress the boss?
Yeah, that could be another possibility without knowing, as he was on the blacklist. So it can be also another explanation. Still, I don't really understand who gains from that, actually, because now the Chinese, the Chinese are also pressuring Malaysia. They're very close allied, Malaysia and China. So now it's a big trouble for a lot of people.
All right, let's talk about that. China flatly denies that it's halting coal imports from North Korea. as a result of first that ballistic missile launch, then the murder. Beijing insists it's merely complying with UN sanctions adopted back in November. So why make the announcement on February the 19th? In 2015, coal made up half of North Korea's exports to China. 85% of Pyongyang's total exports go to their Chinese neighbors. So it really is interesting. It does seem as though this is retaliation for first the ballistic missile launch that we saw recently, and now this murder.
Well, frankly speaking, the Chinese has a very stable policy concerning Korea. They want stability, which means they don't want North Korea to have nuclear test or missile test. But it is the same for the United States. When the United States have military exercises with the South Koreans, when the United States decided to have an anti-missile system in South Korea, they opposed to it. So the Chinese are very cautious. First, they didn't link the explanation of suspending coal exports, which is very important for the North Korean economy. They didn't link it to the assassination of Kim Jong-Nam, or what is called the assassination of Kim Jong-Nam. But what is very clear, the middle-range missile, which was tested on the 12th of February, is not in Chinese interest. Now Donald Trump is in power.
So for you, it's about the missiles. It's not.
I think it is mainly.
It's not about the murder, even though it was announced 2 days ago.
They said it is only the application of the United Nations sanctions. They only say it. And
Right.
they are probably trying to show that to the United States, we apply the sanction. Donald Trump is misjudging us when he says that we are not cooperating with the United Nations.
Harry Kazianis, you agree?
I do agree. I think what's interesting here is that the Chinese parsed their language and said that they were merely complying with United Nations resolutions. If you go back to the history, Chinese adherence to UN resolutions when they come to North Korea is pretty much laughable. There is a lot of different ways that China has tried to skirt different types of sanctions. I've heard rumors of innuendos of different front companies and using third and fourth tier sort of ways to hide different connections to North Korea. So Beijing does have a lot of ways to sort of get around these sanctions and ensure that North Korean cash flows continue to keep going. And that's to China's benefit. Keep in mind, I've spoken to quite a few different military experts in Beijing, people linked to the Chinese government and Chinese military. The number one thing that Beijing is afraid of more than anything else, it is not the United States or the U.S. military. It is a collapse of the North Korean regime. They do not want millions of refugees streaming across the Yalu River in a massive humanitarian crisis. The other thing that they are afraid of is the Korean Peninsula being reunited under Seoul, and Seoul being a military ally of the United States, and seeing those 28,000 troops that you referred of in the beginning of the broadcast moving closer to China. So China has every interest to basically keep kicking the can down the road, so to speak, to keep the North Korean regime going, but not making it any more powerful than what it is.
All right, and that brings us to how the new administration in Washington is going to handle all this. We'll talk about it when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.